Good morning. For the first day in a long time. Don't feel like watching from the sidelines.
Welcome to the Core Conversations podcast by Ampelis, where our goal is to help you fuel, use, and rest your bodies in ways that unlock its innate abilities for physical and mental health. My name is Robbie Harmon, and I'll be your host. Well, welcome to the Core Conversations podcast. My name is Robbie Harmon. I'm the president of Ampelis, and I'll be your host today. We have a very interesting discussion prepared for today with Christapher Cogswell, who we'll introduce in a moment here. But the topic is one that I think is unique, and it's uniquely interesting in light of some of the ethos of what's happening societally. And it's no secret that we're seeing pretty dramatic trends with the mental and physical health of our children, and even fertility rates dropping. And so the topic today is going to be, what's driving some of that, and what do we do about it? What role does nutrition play in that? And more broadly, what do we even do about it? How do we start to think about these issues? And Christapher spent a lot of time thinking about these things. So let's maybe just introduce Christapher first. And Christapher has a background, and you're going to have to help me here, but background in cultural anthropology and entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship. You've launched a couple of different companies, one of which being the Radiant Life Company, which you maybe 20 something years ago, which was really focused on helping provide education and high quality, hard to find nutritional products to people. But you'll have to tell us a little bit more about that and your kind of story. But author of a forthcoming book called EpicGenetics, Unleashing Our Children's Potential for Health, Intelligence, and Beauty. And then also an executive producer on a project that we'll be excited to talk about today called Inconceivable. So excited to hear about all of these things and how you got here and your passion for this topic and how the choices that we make impact future generations and their health. So welcome.
Absolutely.
And
Thank
appreciate
you so
you
much.
being here.
Great to be here, Robbie.
So maybe start with Christapher, if you would, just tell us about your story and how you got to this place where this topic of really our behavior impacting our children and our children's health. How did this all come to be to where you're now leaning into and spending your career focused on these topics?
Yeah, absolutely. As you say those words, I'm brought back to my grandfather, who was an eminent lipid chemist, studied fats and in nutrition and health. And he worked with the USDA. And in his retirement, he actually retired to our lake in northern Wisconsin, where I grew up. So he was a amazing, wild, mad scientist who I would go visit on a regular basis. He very much influenced me. And he had a pipe organ and a gas chromatograph in his living room. And he's that kind of guy, just was always working on different projects in his retirement. And one of the things he did when I was very young was in the mid 70s, he went and actually brought together a team at his own expense, a research team at a research lab in Minnesota that gave him some space. And he wanted to understand the potential problems with trans fats. It was something that bugged him his whole career. Now, this was some of the first research ever done on this subject when margarine was still the rage. Like everyone, in the 70s and 80s and 90s was terrified of butter, and they all gravitated towards this margarine, which was supposed to be the great, healthy alternative. So
I remember Country Crock and all these things. That was,
it can't believe it's not butter.
Yeah.
So his research actually was some of the first research to show that this was a problem, likely, and it seemed to cause problems in rats. And I remember as a kid hearing about the problems, the controversy in the scientific journals about this, and the vegetable industry came on him like a ton of bricks. And I remember asking my mom, who could be mad at my gramps? I didn't understand, but at that time, the industry controlled, the oil, the conversation around nutrition, and the food industry has always been very powerful, but the vegetable industry in particular. So the reason I bring him up is I remember hearing I guess I would say it attuned me to the fact that not everything we're told is true about nutrition and health. And he mentored me in scientific projects. And I always took the boat over, went over to his house, and we'd talk. And so fast forward 25 years, through a series of strange synchronicities, after I graduated from my master's degree in anthropology, my path was really to be a professor and to be an academic. And through a series of very strange synchronicities, I found myself becoming aware of this research that I'll be telling you about. And it never should have happened, but it was something that I was meant to discover. And so I had a small nutritional company at the time in the Bay Area of California, and I found myself talking to some of the organizations that kept this research. They were the archives, and they promoted this research about health and nutrition in traditional cultures and how healthy they were and how much they had to teach us about how we can also be not just healthy, but experience perfect health and physical development. So in the process of connecting with these groups, I discovered that one of Mary Enig, who's really credited as being the one who pushed forward the research around trans fats so that they're now essentially being phased out. I spoke to her and I said, "Oh, my grandfather did some of the first research." She said, "Well, who's your grandfather?" I said, "Herbert Dutton."
Oh,
and
she knew him.
And she said, "Oh yeah, we used
who
to
he was.
We used to run into each other at the Oil Chemist Society meetings." And so their research was, I don't even know, maybe his research inspired her initial research, but she continued it. She wasn't retired, so she continued at her great risk and cost to herself and her career, pushing this forward. So my small company became really one of the first perinatal health organizations, companies in the country that focused around promoting this information, this lost research. And it's been an amazing journey because I didn't pursue my PhD. I didn't, become an academic where I published papers and, satisfied myself with being, developing a career that may or may not have had any effect on anybody. And so the opportunity to be of service in this area has been something that really meant a lot to me. And I met so many people who transformed their lives with this information that it's really been a tremendous pleasure. And unfortunately, in the last 25 years, our children's health has only gotten worse. That's been the biggest shock of my life, that I thought that, you put out information into the world and it catches on and it becomes the way that we do things, but that's not exactly how this world works, especially when you're up against industries that have a vested interest in the status quo. And, RFK Jr. has been saying that there's nothing as profitable as a sick child. And that's unfortunately a terrible and horrifying truth of our time. So we really have to take it on ourselves to make a change that, put our children first. And it really comes down to a new generation of parents that have to, take the responsibility to do things different in their own lives. And that's what I hope we can talk about today is how to do that. It's a very, that the trends are very troubling around our children's health, but there's also some profound solutions if we take a bigger picture view.
I'm excited to talk about some of that. And it's neat to hear that this is rooted all the way back to your relationship with your grandfather and things that you were learning and observing from him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've been very interested in the last 7 to 10 years about some of the concerning trends we're seeing, whether it's increasing incidence of depression and anxiety or ADHD or autism or things that we just didn't, I can't think of anybody that I knew of growing up that was my parents' age that had autism, for example. Right. And it's been interesting. I've pondered, well, why, and even cancer, it feels like the cancer rates are just going through the roof. And this conversation today, I think, is going to be an interesting convergence of those types of health topics with this infertility issues as well, where you see birth rates plummeting. And I've always attributed that to more of a cultural thing. And I know there's other aspects to it. But
Yeah.
I'm excited to explore the convergence of how all these things are related. And is there
Yeah.
a common pathway that's maybe underlying some of the changes
Absolutely.
in our plummeting, fertility rates and our health? So
Yeah.
maybe let's go there for a minute. If we can talk about this infertility problem and your thoughts on the magnitude of that, what's happening. Excuse me, I think I bumped my microphone.
Yeah.
What's happening and what's driving it? Just your reflections on that issue as we now dive into, okay, how can our behaviors affect that?
Yeah. Well, it's the fundamental question of our time, is why is this happening? And, I've been educating about this both in consultations with parents, every way I can for many years. And it's exciting that now this has become such a focus of our collective conversations. And there's many ways you can explore this issue. Kids don't necessarily want to have kids. Young adults don't want to necessarily have kids as much anymore because of all kinds of reasons, and the specter of changing world and economic conditions. And sure, that plays a role. But what I'm here to really help contextualize is when you step back and take a bigger picture view of the situation, you start to see patterns and understandings and illuminations can start to happen that couldn't happen when we're just talking about, this particular generation or this, what's happening in 2025. So yes, it's really terrifying actually what's happening with our fertility. And it's an existential problem we face in the developing world because, as has been discussed now, for the last few months, we're not even replacing our population anymore in terms of the birth of the population here in our country, and it's happening in Japan and Europe. So,
I mean, the exception seems to be some of like the Muslim nations
sure,
are still above the replacement rate.
Yeah.
But even places like where we sit in Utah, which has historically been perceived as this place where we have big families, I think we've now fallen below the replacement rate as well.
Yeah. Well, and it seems to be a mystery until you look at the research I've been discussing, which we'll get into. But this was predicted like 80 years ago, because if you look at traditional cultures, you see a very different picture of health, fertility, and human potential. And we're sort of, we've got quite an amazing society here in the developed world and in the United States. It's no doubt about it. We've had a tremendous progress through technology and big breakthroughs happening all the time. But it can lull us into this sense that we're better, we're more healthy, we live longer than anybody else. And that's actually not true. Because if you look at traditional cultures, you go back, to cultures that haven't been affected even by agriculture. So these are primarily cultures that are non-agricultural. They haven't developed. They are not eating Western refined foods at all. And so that's more Paleolithic. You go back and that's been a discussion over the last 20 years. I'm quite aware. But there's a lot of speculation about what their diets were and why they were so healthy. But that's what it often comes down to. And I have a part of my background's in archaeology where you need to go into the field and try to make sense of very, sparse records. A lot of the things have decayed. A lot of the structures and other artifacts have gone away, but now you're left with some bones and some, stones and foundations and things, and you have to make some assumptions. And so you can not get to the truth of a situation unless you have some way of getting, actually meeting people from the Paleolithic. And that's actually what happened with the research in question. There was a gentleman who was able to go into the field in the early 20th century and meet people who had not been affected, in thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
So your question was about fertility, and I believe that unless we understand this research and we understand our traditional cultures, who and our ancestors who were so much more healthy than we are today, that we're not going to be able to get to the solution that is right in front of us. So
it presents, and I want to go into the research if we can.
Yeah.
I mean, this presents an interesting thought, because, so our whole purpose of this podcast is talking about how we can fuel, use, and rest our bodies to unlock its innate potential for health.
Yeah.
And so often we make it feel so complicated. Like we have to have all these new modern things or these complicated diets to do this. But again, this research you're talking about, this is people that lived a long time ago that for somehow they fueled their bodies in the right ways, and they thrived. They were healthy physically and mentally and otherwise. But maybe you can go deeper and just start to tell us about that, some of that research.
Absolutely. And let me start by saying that there will be skeptical people out there, and I totally understand that, who say, well, they only lived to age 29, or they had all kinds of challenges. Well, actually, the research shows that if these people lived to age 5, they could live as long as we did, as we do today. So their big challenge was making it to age 5 because of all the the issues in their environment and the hardships. But these peoples had incredible physical development. So they had perfectly straight teeth, plenty of room for the wisdom teeth. They had effortless fertility, that when they gave birth, it was like a short, painless affair. It's not what we, unfortunately, our moms experience today too often, which is long, agonizing birth process. And there are reasons for that, which I'll get into. So Dr. Price was a dentist in the early part of the century, the 20th century, in Cleveland. And he wasn't just a dentist. He was a researcher. He developed textbooks. He did research. He did very interesting and research that still defines certain parts of the dental field today, like in root canals. And when he started noticing his young patients coming into the clinic, he's with certain issues, like, certainly with a lot of cavities, because the sugar was becoming very common at that time. But they also had issues relating to crooked teeth, overbites, underbites,
crowding as a result of a narrower jaw and things like that.
So there's 22 bones in the head, and if the skull narrows, it's going to affect the architecture, the design of the whole head. So one of the side effects of this is, as you say, the jaw narrows, the teeth, there's not enough room for the teeth, overbites, underbites. And he was seeing this in his practice, and being a guy who wasn't just happy to make, this very lucrative
career
money
out of filling cavities.
Exactly. In this career, he was interested in why was this happening. So he developed a strategy where he said, you know what, I've heard of these traditional cultures, people living, having excellent health and not eating Western foods, which were just, hitting the mainstream, the mass population in the 20s in America. Let's see if we can learn something from them. So he traveled all around the world for 15 years almost, during a world depression and a world war. And even during those kind of unusual events that might stop other people, every summer he went to a different cultural area. And whether it was Australian Aborigines, African tribes people, isolated Swiss villages, Peruvian highlanders, Polynesian cultures, he went all around the world, Native Americans. And in every single case, these peoples that he encountered, when they ate their traditional diets, not only did they not have diseases of Western civilization, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, mental health issues, obesity, none of that, but their children were born effortlessly, easy, to become pregnant, easy birth. And they had these beautiful string of pearls teeth.
They didn't need orthodontics.
No. So the neighboring tribes that he researched who had begun eating Western foods, they all were experiencing Western diseases. And in a single generation, the children looked different
in
than
one
the
generation.
ancestors. Yeah. So, not just the narrow skulls, but they started exhibiting changes in the skeletal structure, including the narrowed pelvises and things like that. But primarily, Price noticed the teeth. He didn't have a long time to research these tribes. So when you combine that understanding, and he recommended, he was basically a prophet. He was in 1942 saying
he was ahead of his time.
You need to, he warned the world, you need to stay away from processed foods, because not only are you eating empty calories and these denatured oils and refined sugar, but you're not getting what you should be getting. So it's a double whammy.
The fibers, and you're not even. And I remember reading in James Nestor's book, I think it was Breathe, about just chewing the foods, and how that strengthens your jaw and helps maintain structure and things like that we don't get anymore. And that contributes as well. But all comes back to like these soft, processed, sugar-filled foods and things that we put into our bodies. Yeah.
And I want to say something about that while I'm sure that chewing is very important, and I think there's been a certain, trajectory out there from Paul Ehrlich and Nestor and others who are trying to explain this entire transformation of our population and our physical degeneration, to chewing and things like that. And I don't agree with that at all. I think that it's a much bigger picture. If you really look at, in 100 years, you don't go from, people who have these gorgeous wide smiles and women who give birth easily to all the changes we're seeing because of chewing or something like that. There are much bigger forces at play, which also brings in the second body of research, the Dr. Pottinger. But I'll stop there for now.
Can we define a term that I think will be helpful as we continue the conversation? Because your background is epigenetics.
Well, anthropology. But in my business and in my my entrepreneurial world, yes, the epigenetics has been a big part of it.
And let's describe the difference between talking about genetics and epigenetics. Yeah. Genetics is what's hardwired in us, and maybe help me here, but epigenetics is the manifestation. What are the things that we're doing to turn on or off the different gene expression? Is that correct? Or maybe help me there.
Absolutely. It's the environment in epigenetics that determines whether the genetic blueprint expresses in fully, or genes that are turned on and off. But another way to look at it, and I think that's how we tie in here, is when you look at the ability to express our genetic blueprint, the environment is critical, and the environment of us all was our mother's womb. And ultimately, the nutritional richness, the circumstances of our conception. So I believe it's fair to call this an epigenetic issue, even though we're not talking so much about genes turning on and off. We don't need to go there to complicate things for our
for this discussion.
For listeners. Yeah. It's more about what are we doing to ensure that our beautiful, incredible genetic blueprint gets manifested in its fullness. And this discussion is a huge part of that.
So maybe we can go there, because what I thought was so interesting as I was reading about your work and some of the things you're doing is just the importance of preconception nutrition and preparing for, even before you conceive, preparing to conceive, and how that can impact the health in many different ways of that child. And, because I've heard about these different conversations where we talk about the different endocrine disruptors and carcinogens that make their way into our blood and end up in the umbilical cord. But this is even more so than during the time of pregnancy. You're talking about, we need to culturally anticipate becoming pregnant and conceiving and prepare earlier. So I'd love to get into that and just talk about, okay, so what is the ideal case, scenario here as people think about fertility, having children? What nutritional protocols should we be thinking about? How long before we conceive should we be getting into those kinds of nutrition habits? Anything you have to share? I think this is just fascinating.
Absolutely. Well, that's the other part of Dr. Price's research. And it's amazing that I didn't learn about this during my 8 years of anthropology research and higher education, but he discovered in all of his journeys, when he talked to the people and these cultures, and they would all prepare for conception with their moms and their dads for several years before conception. And he asked each tribe, each group, why do you do this? And they said something to the effect of to have perfect children, to have healthy children, or to have beautiful children. So they knew. And this really represented one of the most profound and precious pieces of cultural wisdom that they were able to generate and to transmit to their parents and their children. And if you think about it, it's like, well, what are the chances that all tribes that he contacted knew this information? And I like to think of it differently. Because I think this is really a law of nature, if a culture didn't know it, they didn't exist at the time of Dr. Price, and they don't exist anymore. If you don't know this information, you don't continue to exist as a species.
It really is an existential issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So given that our traditional ancestors knew this and prized this information, the question is now, how do we translate that into the 21st century?
Right.
And our recommendation now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not able to give specific personalized nutritional advice, but I can say that given, as you said, that there's issues with toxicity. I think that the average mom has 300 chemicals now in her breast milk, which means that it's in her blood and it's in all of us too, by the way.
And I just read something like 200 on average, 200 and some odd different chemicals that are foreign that shouldn't be there in the umbilical cord as well.
Right. Exactly. So that's just the situation that exists for everyone. If you do nothing, I mean, if you live like everyone lives today, that's what's the results you're going to get. So what we like to do is help inspire people to take general commonsensical steps to address that before conception, as well as to increase the nutritional density of the mom and the dad. And the ideal would be a couple years before conception, but let's just say even a year before conception would be great. To get into that kind of, I think that young people today should get into the kind of state or shape so that they're always ready to have a child, because you don't always know when that's going to happen.
Right.
So I'd love to help inspire young people to just get into a great
It should
state.
be the way we live. We're going to be healthier if we live that way anyway, not just when we're preparing to have children.
This is how all of us should think about being healthy is let's get rid of the toxins. Let's get the nutrient density to the point where we realize our full potential for energy, for mental health, for physical development, and for fertility. So there's a whole path to do this that we help people with, and I'm working on a book that this year that will be released called EpicGenetics, which is all about how our blueprint is beautiful. It's incredible. It whether we express it or not actually depends on how many generations we are away from parents who lived on a farm or before the advent of refined foods. And if you do the math in your head, for me, I'm the second generation of, in my family, from my grandfather who grew up on a farm in southern Wisconsin. He gave birth to children who were pretty much, coming from a natural environment, but still, my mom was born in 1944, so there would have been plenty of time to have be affected by margarines and things like that all the refined foods. So,
but
I'll leave it there for now.
But I do love what you're saying, though. It's like we have this beautiful, it's miraculous genetic makeup, and the ability to thrive physically, mentally, so forth. It's there. It's a matter of what are we doing to unlock that, and fuel it and use our bodies in a way that manifests those innate potential abilities for health.
Exactly. And if you look at the situation of parents today, like you were saying earlier, people have become used to kids needing inhalers and having EpiPens around for the life-threatening allergy, peanut allergies or whatever, and autism and ADHD. And just not in obesity and depression and anxiety. And these are not things that kids are supposed to experience.
Right.
Not only that, but as there's a search right now for the origins of chronic diseases, and they're doing good work, like getting rid of ultra processed foods, addressing the oversugaring of our children, things like that. But, we're seeing kids now with type 1 diabetes. I mean, very early diabetes, heart disease, cancers, things like that should never affect a child. And so I would argue that those things, again, were predicted in the 20th century by these two doctors.
Yeah.
And they warned us back then, if you continue down this path, you're going to have kids with increasing challenges. They won't be able to reproduce. They're going to deal with anxiety. They're going to deal with cancer, all the degenerative diseases that previously adults only got. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse until you address this, not just for people's diets generally, but especially before conception.
So interesting.
Yeah.
And I would love to go back to the question here in a second. With some of these traditional cultures, they're different parts of the world, different types of foods and things that they have access to. And so what patterns are we identifying to say, here was the solution that helped them avoid some of these issues? Because they arguably were probably eating different things and preparing in different ways, but there was some commonality or something that was good. And we want to identify that. But I do think it's interesting as you kind of identified that trying to get to the root of all of the chronic diseases as well as these mental health diseases. I don't know if you've read any Chris Palmer. Do you know Chris Palmer? He's a psychiatrist out of Harvard, but he's identified a lot of these correlations between the mental health and the neurodegenerative diseases and these chronic illnesses. Yeah. And they're bidirectionally correlated, which is very interesting. So I said, there's got to be a common pathway. Yeah. And then his contention is that has a lot to do with our metabolic health. And what that means is how well we're producing energy at the cellular level, which is very much impacted by what we put into our bodies.
Well, let me take it a step further, because Dr. Pottinger did studies in the mid part of the 20th century where he looked at cats, and he basically ran a Dr. Price-like study, but with cats who reproduce much quicker than we do. So he found that if you, controls and everything, but the group that had the most deficient diet exhibited the same kinds of issues that Price found in his patients in Cleveland, but also all the tribes that he looked at.
Interesting.
So,
and you can see it a lot quicker in a cat. Yeah.
Yep. So their faces got narrower, their teeth, were affected, their sinuses were affected skeletally. The rib cage was compressed, the pelvis compressed in the first generation. And that only got worse because he started to run them through the generation. So
and what he's doing is he's depriving them of some key nutrient dense foods is essentially what he's doing.
Exactly. So, and obviously it's not a perfect comparison because we're not carnivores necessarily, we're more omnivores. And, but when you look at the evolution and the direction of these cats, you start to see uncanny similarities to what we're going through in the 20th century and the 21st century as humans, where you have the continued devolving of the skeletal structure, but also the rise of degenerative diseases, chronic diseases, anxiety, mental. You can't really diagnose exactly in a cat, but if they're sitting in the corner in a ball and hissing and like scratching,
you can see,
I mean, we all know our cats, and if they're out of sorts, you tell.
Can't do a psychoanalysis, but you can see the behaviors.
Yeah, exactly. If now they're not cuddly and they're fighting and doing antisocial behavior and anxiety, but also the infertility starts soaring in these cats generation by generation, to the point where in the fourth generation, all reproduction ceased.
So as manifested by measuring sperm count, or what? How were they measuring that?
I believe they were measuring infertility in terms of the cohorts of cats and their success,
their ability to actually have another litter of kittens.
Yeah, and when you see no more little kittens emerging out of a couple of a freely associating group of cats, something's really wrong.
Yeah.
That's what unfortunately would happen in the fourth generation. And that's why I think all of our red lights should be flashing, and we should be really concerned, because we're now, most of us are in our second, third, or fourth generation, depending on your own unique family history. But all the measures that I just described in these cats are flashing in our children. We're seeing in our children the chronic diseases, the degenerative diseases, the infertility, the antisocial behavior, the degeneration of our skulls, of our teeth, of our skeletal systems. And I just wanted to make a point about that I would have thought that in the last 60 years, there would have been research to follow up on, say, Pottinger or Price's work.
You would assume. I mean, this is a big deal.
This is a big deal. And it wasn't like it was, completely anonymous research, or it wasn't known. It's the kind of thing that should have gotten us to really look into this and confirm it and research it in much more depth. Because and I'm getting back to your point about the metabolism and the mood and energy production and stuff. So try to imagine what the implications are of having a skull that's compressing and narrowing, but the brain is not.
Oh, interesting.
So you've got the endocrine system on the pituitary, pineal, the various organs of the endocrine system up there. There's obviously metabolism in general is controlled substantially from the organs in the skull. So one of the questions that should be obvious at this point is the compression of our skulls, which all of us have, by the way, I'm not just talking about some people, all of us, unless you are in an uncontacted tribe in the Amazon somewhere, and that was your dad and your mom, we all have had this happen to us. So what are the metabolic effects? What are the mood effects? What are the intelligence effects of that? And just to illustrate this, I'll tell you a quick story. So Dr. Price had a child brought to him in the 40s probably, or maybe the 30s, I don't recall. But this child had what probably today would be called Down syndrome, I believe. And he was 16 years old. He was very dysfunctional. Like he couldn't run his life as a 16-year-old would. Couldn't make eye contact, no sense of humor. He wasn't able to get around, to school on his own, unassisted. He had the sexual development of a 9-year-old. And there was a question, well, what could we do for this child? And because Price understood was very curious about the effects of compressed skull on a situation like this, he did a radical thing. He got the permission of the parents. He sawed open the upper palate and with braces made a gradual expansion of the upper palate and the skull thereby. Within 6 months, the child had matured to a 16-year-old level sexually. He was able to make eye contact. He had a sense of humor. He could ride the buses all around Cleveland to get where he needed to go. He was like a completely different child. So this does not in itself prove anything, but the contention is it should make you very interested and curious.
The decompressing of the brain potentially, enabled that development to take place the way it should have.
Yep.
Very interesting.
So we now have a generation of children are tremendously anxious. Unfortunately, they've got all kinds of metabolic problems, tension problems. So I'm not saying anything here except that it's very interesting and we should be curious about that. What are the consequences of being in the second or third generation of this compression of our skull? And the reason that we have the compression is that, just to make it super clear, when a fetus is in the womb and there's not enough nutrients to support its full growth and development, nature has to take shortcuts. And that's basically what we've been saying, but I just want to make it super clear that one of the shortcuts that nature takes is in the cranium. And we call it the middle third of the face. That's what Price called it. That is not developed fully. And so that affects the jaw, the sinuses, the build out of the 22 bones of the head, most of which we can't see. So if you now have to compromise on building out the structures of the head, and now you have not enough room for the wisdom teeth, some kids have not enough room for their tongue. There's a guy who wrote a book about it called this 6-foot tiger in a 3-foot cage. And it's all about what if you lived your life? I mean, I'm not saying the book is all about that, but it raises the question. Some kids actually live with a tongue that's too big for their mouth.
And so the structure of the face doesn't accommodate the tongue.
Yeah. And so you feel like you're choking every time you swallow.
Yeah.
There's now a new type of functional orthodontistry, which they actually work to expand the teeth and the palate through the braces, the use of braces and certain, techniques, so that while you were born with a compromised skull and jaw, there's actually ways to start expanding the palate. And a lot more people know about that today than when I had braces in the 80s, and they brought my palate in for sure. And that also affected undoubtedly my, brain and other things.
Very interesting.
So there's so I want to just bring the point to really focus here that these are the conversations we should be having, and they may not be super comfortable because we have to confront, the fact that we've all been affected, and that we really need to change the way we do things, and as a culture. It's not just about getting some information and, reading a book or something, but we need to change basic fundamental things about the way our agricultural system. There's only certain types of foods that unlock our genetic potential. We can't just, eat whatever we want to. And taking care to prepare before conception leads to a type of consciousness, a type of thoughtfulness and preparation that we're not used to doing in our society. But our ancestors did it. They revered this. They held this as very sacred information. And I think we really need to look at that very carefully and start emulating that. So
when my second child was born, I remember holding him at church one time, and he had a huge head as a baby.
Yeah.
And somebody said,
it's a good sign.
Somebody said, his head's like the same size as your head.
Wow.
So maybe my wife did something okay.
Absolutely.
With this.
Yeah. But and you can watch also how your child grows up, the alignment of the teeth, how much orthodontistry is needed. Do they keep their wisdom teeth? These are sort of interesting things to monitor in our children.
Very interesting. Yeah. So, there's so many ways I want to go with this conversation. The term I think came up when I was reading beforehand about some of the work you've done, the Omega generation, and how, you get the cat study, you get 4 generations down and they can't have, their fertility rates are shot. They can't have any more children. Yeah. Talk about that. And then let's go from there. 'Cause that sounds very apocalyptic. That's, as we said, existential problem. Yeah. And so maybe we use that then to be the climax. And then we start to talk about, so what do we do about it? Because it's a big problem that's hard to change.
It is. Yeah. So, Kate Shanahan in Deep Nutrition, which is a book I highly recommend, really tackles some areas of our conversation today that in a very in an innovative way. She talks about the Omega generation as being, are we approaching the Omega generation, the final generation of children who can actually conceive? And like I said before, we should know that. Like there should have been, if we had our priorities straight, I think the NIH has had $1 trillion. Let's see, 750 billion is what I calculated since the year 2000 has been their budgets. And they have not looked at this. If you do inflation adjusted numbers, it's probably, well over $1 trillion. And that's just the NIH. So it just is what it is. We just have to accept where we are right now, that there are people who are going to say, well, you don't know that humans are going to not be able to reproduce after the 4th generation.
Right.
That's true. We don't know. But if we get to that point of the 4th generation, and that is actually our biological limit, we're done.
We don't want to find out.
Yeah. There's no way to turn it back at that point. So our philosophy is we need to take this very seriously, and we need to come together as a species, really, humanity, to address this, which is going to take, a lot of creativity, a lot of innovation, a lot of change to do this, more than just on a one-by-one basis. We need to reach kids today where they are, which is, social media. It's in schools. It's there needs to be more changes in the way we support and allow our agriculture. Like we have certain agricultural policies that incentivize certain ways of growing food. And one of those is feeding cows and pigs monocrops like corn and soy that are heavily pesticized. And that is so baked into our public policy, our agricultural policy, that we all through our tax dollars support that, the subsidies, the infrastructure. And it turns out those foods, as eating grain-fed beef is not going to cut it. There's a whole lot of nutrition in there. And all this has been coming out over the last 10 to 15 years. The nutrients in truly grass-fed and grass-finished beef, eggs, chickens, pigs are absolutely priceless. Like they really are critical for our genes, for our bodies to fully realize their potential, and especially before conception. So things like raw milk, certain supplements, whole food based. That's why we're
having this
talking
conversation.
together.
We've been excited about that. Even in the things that we take to try to be healthy, sometimes we're getting synthetic things that are not optimally used by our bodies. Yeah.
So when I started my company back in the 90s, we focused on whole food nutrition, and it was a different environment. You couldn't get a grass-fed burger back in 1999. You could, very often you couldn't find raw milk grown, produced from grass-fed cows, and fermentation was not something that people really talked about. Broth. These are all things that have been pioneered and that, I know my company was focused on and still is. I sold it some time ago, but this is the kind of thing. Fortunately, I'm so excited to see the transformation of the conversations, the farmers markets. I was, in Provo last few days and spending time and checking out restaurants and health food stores, and it's really impressive what's going on. So it's happening all over, and it's really exciting. But in order for us to change this and to reverse this, and I'll mention that the good news here is that Dr. Price found that he found cultures who had begun eating Western foods, had children, some of these parents, and then had a child that didn't look the same as the ancestors, had health problems, dental issues. They would go back to the traditional diets and have another child, and this child looked like the ancestors again.
Very interesting.
So the blueprint is there. And this is why the difference between genetics and epigenetics. It's about the environment. How are we going to express our genetic blueprint? And the environment, the perinatal environment, is critical. So eating these foods, both parents before conception, is critical and detoxifying, but also doing things like, learning about emotional balance, stress reduction, good relationship skills. Obviously, these are things that all should be taught in high school. What a great place to, what useful skills, they might be more useful than figuring out, the angles of a circle and things like that, which I enjoyed actually in high school. But when I look back, I'm amazed at the number of things that I did not learn, and that has to change,
Well, so it's such a big problem, it's, the solutions are systemic and multifaceted, whether it's we have to address our regulatory bodies, our education, our food supply chain, all of these things that can feel overwhelming. And so it's hard maybe for people to say, well, it feels helpless, but you're doing something about it that I think is very cool with your Inconceivable project. Yeah. Maybe you could tell us about that and how you're trying to approach this in a way that starts to move the needle.
Absolutely. So Inconceivable is a movie that we're working on that we're focused around reaching young people, but everybody really, with the understanding this sort of this insight that our fertility crisis and our children's health crisis are related and actually have a common source, which is the fact that we've ignored, forgotten, just are not implementing the ancestral wisdom that we all had. If you go back far enough, everyone knew this at one point on the planet Earth, and we're not practicing it. But it's our goal is not to essentially make people throw up their hands. We have to focus on solutions, like you were talking about, and we actually. In 1999, it would have been much more difficult to inspire people to make these changes because the foods just weren't there. But actually, they really are today. And if people really want to find these high quality nutrient dense foods, it's
accessible, more accessible than it was.
Much more accessible. Now, if the entire population wanted to transfer to this diet today, I don't know that it would be possible. I mean, there's just not enough supply, but it's a good problem to have. You know, the more demand there is, the more people dedicate themselves to this type of farming. And there's a renaissance happening around regenerative agriculture, as you probably know. And more and more farmers are making this shift. I actually did my BA thesis in anthropology on sustainable agriculture, and back in 1992 on the barriers for farmers to change to sustainable agriculture, and been watching those start to fall away as the new policies come online and the demand ramps up. So our film is really going to focus on inspiring people, because it's one thing to get the information, it's another thing to actually do something.
To be motivated to do something.
And it's part of a bigger picture of media production that we're working on, because it's a real cultural change that we need. And it's not going to just happen because somebody reads a book or goes to one movie or has one friend who taps you on the shoulder and turns you onto some social media feed. It's something that really, I believe, is going to take some time, but we're calling on parents. We're inviting parents to be pioneers. And it's very exciting because they're actually it's not an untested, untried thing we're talking about. There's a little known community of parents who have been doing this for 25 years. So the stories that we have, the pictures we have are unbelievable. Like parents who could not conceive, who are able to conceive. Like I said, these two things are related. So if you transform your diet, you detox, you do some work for before conception, you can transform your fertility, and you can transform your children. So these kids that are being born, and I'll go back to Price for a second, because we've had, just as he saw parents who gave birth with on their Western diet, and then had these amazing results with having children after a traditional diet. Again, we actually have parents who had a couple children, where they didn't know this information. Then they discovered it. Then they took some time to get themselves really ready, and they had another child. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard this story where, they love all their children equally, but they will say, I have to tell you, my third child, the child I prepared for, is different. They don't have the same health problems. They don't, their mind is sharper. They don't, they're like little linemen, football, linebackers or something. They're sturdy. They don't get sick. Their teeth are different. They have sharper vision, things like that. That it's just, I've heard that so many times.
And on one hand, it's so profound. And on the other hand, it's kind of obvious.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like, of course, like we're creating this thing inside of our amazing body. And if you're giving your body the right ingredients to make it well, it's kind of obvious.
Exactly. And that's why my EpicGenetics book and the movie, we're going to focus on the benefits as much as possible. Because there are some books in this field, and they're really good, but they don't necessarily focus right up front on the benefits and the choice. Yeah. Parents have a choice. You can do what everyone else is doing and get the results everyone else is getting, which are pretty terrifying and depressing. Or you can take some time, do some of this very simple stuff, and have children who are healthier than you are. We can't make promises like you're going to get a child that looks like, children 100 years ago right away. It might take a couple generations to get back to that. We're not sure. But, like every parent will want their child to have the best advantages. You want the child to be intelligent, to have a beautiful smile. You think about people in this movie stars that we love in this society, in our culture, that just when they smile, it's like Julia Roberts. You have to put your sunglasses on. Her smile
Right.
is so big.
So big and bright. Yeah.
And then Serena Williams is a great example. Go on the internet, look at her beautiful smile, perfect teeth, but very wide smile. A lot of teeth flash out, and Britney Spears. There's all kinds of examples, and whether they are naturally born like that or had the work. When you look at Dr. Price's research, what really blows you away is he took pictures of these people, and we'll put some examples in the links here. But you're shocked when you see how amazingly beautiful these traditional cultures were, and how they had this. He remarked on it a lot. He was in awe of their generous, kind, wonderful spirits and their happiness. And then when they smiled, it was like they looked like they had false teeth. And in the next generation, the neighboring tribes, he took pictures of the children who born to the parents who ate Western foods, and they definitely were different. Overbites, underbites, much narrower smiles. So our point is, parents can make these choices and give their children these advantages. I mean, let's face it, these are advantages that help your child, including themselves being able to have children. And you can affect your children's fertility, and even their children's, because when your baby girl is born, she has a certain number of eggs already in her that are affected by what you've prepared.
So it really is, if it can affect your choices, can affect multiple generations of your posterity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so our goal is to help create, support this conversation around, we as a species need to make these choices. Where are we going? Are we literally going to just collapse into oblivion? Or if you think about your family tree, you could imagine it visually. Your family tree in the future could look like a dilapidated tree with a few limbs and no leaves, or it can look like a beautiful, glorious oak tree, and unfortunately, I think we did some research a few years ago where the average person like 200 years ago could have expected to have 250 descendants to the fifth generation, was it? I can't recall right now, but it was something really impressive. And today, with all the things people are dealing with and our kids and our health, the average person can expect, I think a fifth of that or something like that. So we have the power to change that is the point. And we have to take the big enough picture to do that.
Well, I love the idea of starting with a movie like this, because I do think things like this require a cultural shift, and there's very few things like media that can touch somebody's heart or give them knowledge and motivation to actually go do something. And hopefully it will spur then the next wave of innovation and product development and research and other things, because somebody was moved by, and I know that's part of your vision too, is we're going to create this movie that kind of hopefully will spark the aha moments and the motivation, and then eventually at some point have some educational resources and structure in a structured way, as well as a research component to the vision as well.
Absolutely. Let me say one more thing about the movie, that some of these parents, all of these parents really haven't had their stories told. The people who've done this in the last 25 years successfully. Yeah.
Is that going to be the focus of the movie, is trying to tell it through the stories of these people?
That's going to be a big part of the focus. Yeah. We don't want to just talk at people. We want to inspire them with parents who faced terrible, history with unsuccessful pregnancies, infertility, other health challenges in their family, and then what happened when they took this approach.
Can I ask a question? I don't want to derail your train of thought, but are there any, we've tried to have a recurring theme in these conversations about little by little stories where we talk about little behaviors that can cause big changes. Yeah. Are there any of those stories that you could maybe just illustrate for us? Like, these are the specific things that somebody did that led to that improved outcome. You shared that one family that made some changes and had different outcome, but I'm trying to get more, maybe a little visual, help people visualize, what does that actually look like? What changes do people need to make to do that?
Absolutely. One person I can think of right away is, she was came from a family. So her husband's family was the family that they were, aging gracefully. They were on no pharmaceuticals. They had grown up on a farm. They great health, golfing, tennis, all that stuff, well into their older age. I don't remember the actual ages here, but the mom her family was very different. They listened to all the health advice from the traditional allopathic system. They were on multiple pharmaceuticals, and they ate a lot of processed foods. So her challenge was she started putting two and two together, why she had certain health problems, why she was so challenged in her fertility. And I recall helping her to make the connections and say, look, you see it in your own families. There's your husband's parents are thriving, and they've had almost no health issues, and yours are very challenged, and it's all about what you eat. So she started taking control and started cleaning out her
purge
her
the
pantries, all the seed oils, all of the flours that are contaminated with glyphosate. They got a water filter, whole house system, water filtration, and just started learning how to make some of their own foods because she hadn't been given that in her childhood. So it was absolutely amazing. And her infertility issues went away, and she was able to conceive a family, and has just never looked back. So, I mean, that's the short version.
That's great though.
Yeah.
But stories like that they're out there, and that's part of what you're hoping to do is shine a light on those and help people have hope because of them.
Yeah. And they're not huge changes either. I mean, it's not like when you think about the things we do in our life and the problems we overcome, this is not insignificant, but it's not like the biggest thing you've ever had to overcome in your life. Just when people can realize these are doable, you can be broken down over time. It doesn't all have to happen at once. You can take a year to make some of these changes and implement things, like you say, small but sure changes really are sustainable. But trying to do everything all at once is very
can feel overwhelming.
It can feel overwhelming, but that's where good coaches and good programs come in. And we're going to be offering a class that helps people over several weeks to get their head around the things that we recommend, that we've seen in our 30 years in this field that have really worked for people,
and make a plan
and make a plan and really break it down so it's manageable and doable. Because everything, every journey begins with a single step, but it's the intention. And if you can just have the intention to change and to transform yourself and the mom and the dad, absolutely. There's no reason why you can't have tremendous success and affect your family for generations. It's like a huge gift to your children, but also to your whole family tree, really.
And that's very motivating.
Yeah.
That's very motivating.
Absolutely.
Thinking about, proffering that gift to your children.
I mean, what other gift is more precious than giving the gift of health, well-being, intelligence, beauty, fertility, success. It's
very motivating.
Yeah. It would be fun to have parents, create a little video of their process they could share with their kids someday, because they would be able to, their kids could be able to be inspired by that too, and implement the same kinds of things. So
what are common, I don't know if you encounter criticisms of this idea or if they're out there, but people might, and maybe it's that it feels like, well, I'm too late. Like in my situation, we've already had our children.
Yeah.
And so how should we think about it in situations like that? People who are listening to say, oh, I wish I would have known this before I had my children. Yep.
Well, that's one of the things that drives me, because in my company, I would often talk to people and I loved chatting with people. And one of the refrains I kept hearing when I would talk to older folks was, oh my God, if I could just turn back time, I would do anything to go back to even when my kid was 5 and I could make, changes, and much less before birth. And I first of all, I think it's important to just go easy on ourselves and not to be hard on ourselves. We all do the best we can. We do the best with what we know. And this is not about making people feel, bad or that they should have done more. This is about looking forward and making a change, because we've all been kind of in a spell, for a long time. Our agricultural system, our food system, our government has really failed us with their recommendations for generations. So we shouldn't, we shouldn't waste a lot of time with that. But what I would say to people who are older and who want to know what they can do, I'd say, talk to your children, talk to your grandchildren, if you don't have children, talk to people who may want to have children. Like, how can we all come together to make a change and to bring this wisdom forward? Send people who might be able to act on it, a book, tell them about a movie, become members of a regenerative farm, like support these farming communities to grow now, so that they can be even more ramped up by the time that more people are needing them. Like, we can all choose through every day, the things we buy, the media we consume, taking a stand on social media, like letting people know about things. Like, we're all in this together, because it's really an issue that transcends our own families. Like, if we do this, and have this perfect family with 300 descendants by the 5th generation, it's not going to mean anything if our entire population collapses because no one else is doing it. Like, we all need to be doing it.
It has to be a movement. Yeah, we've talked about that a lot as a company, as we're trying to play our little part in saying, hey, we need a better way to fill the nutritional gaps that people aren't getting through their foods or through their existing supplements. So we've tried to do a little, but we've talked often about man, what we really need is to catalyze a movement, because we can't fix it. And what you're doing can't fix it alone. It has to be people that see what you're doing, feel motivated to act, and then they do their part. And it creates this cascading innovation.
Well, and I love what you're doing with the whole food core 7. I mean, that's like a critical part of the solution, is making it easy for people. Yeah. Because not everybody's going to want to give the time that it takes to create the nutrient dense meals for every single meal. Yeah. So having
filling
more
the gaps is important.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's critical.
How can people support what you're doing in where you are in the process? Yeah. So if people listen to this and they say, this really resonates with me, how can they learn more? How can they support you?
Absolutely. In the notes, I'm sure we'll put a link to our website, inconceivable.io, and people can get on the mailing list to know when that's going to be coming out. We're in the process of, we're still in the development process. We're discussing the funding with several groups. So we're sure it's going to be moving forward, but if people are interested in supporting it, we're happy to talk with them about that. We are launching a class that's going to be a several-week class to help people move forward and create a plan. And we're also really well connected to other resources, and I'm hopefully we can put a couple of those in the notes. And just to give people an orientation to where do we recommend people go for more information and next steps to really make it as digestible and doable as possible. So
when do you anticipate your book release as well?
Our goal is by the end of this year. So it's out after the holidays, and available. So
when that comes out as well, people can purchase that book and
EpicGenetics. The subtitle is The Secret of Restoring Our Children's Health, Intelligence, Beauty, and Fertility. Mm-hmm. So, some of this, I've left the word beauty in there just because maybe it's a little bit controversial, but when you think about it, we
live in a vain society. It's probably a good,
exactly.
It's motivating.
Yeah. In the Instagram generation, there's nothing wrong with focusing on that or making that a part of it. And partly it's because when we express our genetic potential, there's a deep beauty that's expressed in that. And we'll talk more about that in the book, but it actually relates to the fundamental algorithms, you might say, of nature, how nature grows. You've heard of this, the Fibonacci series, the phi ratio. Oh, yeah. Well, it turns out our body is designed, and when we express our genetic blueprint in a full way, our face reflects that, our body reflects that, the proportions, And
becomes naturally more appealing. And
yeah, and there's a whole interesting rabbit hole, which is why we all find certain people beautiful. It turns out their faces reflect a certain proportion that relates, and I believe it's because it relates to the proportion that's encoded in our genes. Yeah. So when I talk about beauty, it's not necessarily just vanity. It's just when you have a beautiful, perfect smile, it's a final result of the alignment of the bones of the head. So it reveals the symmetry that's going on deep inside the skull, and the fact that you were lucky enough to have the nutrients to build out your skull according to your blueprint. Most of us didn't get that. And so we're dealing with skulls and teeth and, bodies that are nature did the best that it could with us. And thank goodness that we're alive. I'm not sitting here steaming about the fact that several generations away from that epigenetic symmetry. But we can all give that gift more and more to our children if we just follow, the types of nutritional approach of our ancestors. And I realize I didn't answer completely a question.
I was going to come back there right now, so I'm glad you are.
I realize now I didn't quite answer that question. You asked about these are all different cultures and different diets.
Yeah.
So how do we make sense of that? And the way that Price did it was very brilliant. He said, some of the peoples he looked at were eating mostly land animals, like, the equivalent of beef. Maybe it was like antelope and tubers and berries and things like that. And others lived in Fiji or the South Pacific, and they ate mostly seafoods and truncal fruits and things like that. So the diets were indeed very different, but when he looked and analyzed the nutrient density, he found similarities. And they were rich in minerals. They were rich in fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, K2. And at the time, K2 wasn't identified. He called it the X factor.
Oh, interesting.
And, the activator X. And, but it really was the X factor. And he was astonished at how much of this was in these diets, all these diets. And he had samples of the diets analyzed in labs. And even though he didn't call it activator X, he said, it appears that this fat-soluble vitamin is the key to the whole thing, because it is the substance, and we now call it K2, but it's a substance that pulls minerals into the bones. So if a mom doesn't have enough K2 and minerals, and
doesn't matter, you're taking your calcium supplement.
Yeah, you're just
you're not going to use
filling
it.
your arteries and your joints with calcium if you don't have enough K2. Well, it turns out K2 is the main fat-soluble vitamin that we want in grass-fed beef, pasture-raised eggs, raw milk that comes from grass-fed cows, salmon that's grown comes from the wild. Every animal that grows in its natural context is full of K2. As well as, the omegas and all these great other things, isomers of CLA and things like that are now shown to have all kinds of amazing effects. Yeah. So the movement for regenerative agriculture is actually critical to our future. And that's one of the things we're going to be talking about in the movie and the book, is that for us as a species to make it, it's not an option to not transform our agriculture. It's not an option to maintain our fisheries in a wild capacity in a sustainable way, because these foods are what actually allows us to realize not just our potential for physical development but actually to be able to reproduce. That's why we're declining, as our agriculture has been destroyed in the last 80 years. To the point where most people and the food system, the food industry has jumped on and, of course, made so many processed foods for us. And so now I think the average child is eating at least 60% ultra-processed foods. And I think it's probably more than that for children. For the general population, I think it's over 60%. And that's just not it's not sustainable. It's a recipe for failure and
it's a recipe
collapse.
for exactly what we're seeing, which is 75% of the population being overweight or obese.
Yeah, and so much infertility,
Yeah,
and
all
what
of these things.
and what Price and Pottinger, you can't repeat this enough, I think, what Price and Pottinger's research combined in a combined sense tells us is that if we want to continue as a species, we not only need to transform our agriculture and our food system and pull out the nasty things like is starting to happen at the US government level, which is great, but we need to go further and to support our moms and dads to practice the preconception nutrition like our ancestors did. And if they do that, infertility will transform. People will be able to have, really truly healthy children again, which again, most of us haven't even encountered a truly healthy child in a long time, unfortunately. And children were being born in the 1930s and 40s with straight teeth, but that stopped, in the last 80 years, 60, 80 years, to the point where you rarely, like, when was the last time? Maybe you see it here in wonderful Utah with all the great family values and focus on families and the nutrition and things you guys have here. But for most of the world, really, finding a child with naturally straight teeth, really strong vision, no mental health challenges, no asthma, no chronic diseases, no unusual allergies. It's just very rare, and we can change that.
Yeah, I can't think of anything more inspiring, and I love the focus of this conversation, because so often we'll talk about these topics of health and nutrition and movement and sleep, and it's a lot about our own physical and mental health, and thinking about it though, and realizing that, oh man, this really does affect whether we've already had children and we're just now educating our own children and preparing them to give this gift to their children, or we're preparing to have our own children. Like it's a new lens that's not focused on self. It's focused on a gift to society and to your children of health and beauty and all these things. I just love that focus. I think it's wonderful. Yeah,
we really need, I was calling it a Manhattan Project for a while, and I was like, no, we don't want to use necessarily a wartime metaphor. I was thinking more and more about like a Marshall Plan. I mean, kids today probably may or may not even understand what that is, but we need to rebuild our society, and it needs to be all hands on deck. The kind of focus that we've been told to have around the specter of global warming, for example, and some of us agree with that and some of us don't. But that level of focus and resources pouring in, to transform our society, I think is, if I could wave a magic wand, I would.
It's that kind of movement that's needed. Yeah, I love it.
And so, even in the 30 years that we've all been obsessed about global warming, our children's health has absolutely cratered. And we missed an opportunity, really, I think, as a society to address that, because we don't exactly know what's going to happen, if global warming is human caused, and what that would even result in. But we do know what's going to happen with our children and our society if we don't address this. I mean, I hope we're getting a sense of that from this conversation. Yeah. And we just really need to take it seriously.
We try to impart ideas and action to everybody in these conversations, which is, if there's one simple thing somebody can do just to maybe start down the path of better health for themselves and their children, listening to this conversation. I don't know if you have something that comes to mind that you could share. Just start here. Like, here's a simple, actionable thing you can take away from this conversation.
Absolutely. I would say transform your diet around animal products. So when you buy meats, choose meats that are grass-fed and grass-finished, buy eggs that are pasture raised. If you like milk, find a good source of raw milk and see. You might be saying, well, I don't trust raw milk. Well, look into it, because it's been sold in America for, forever. I mean, it's the original milk, and the story of how it got sort of demonized is fascinating. And it's some skullduggery in there that we've been made to fear something that actually is an incredible health food. So if the animal foods are where the fat soluble vitamins are, where the vitamin K2 is, the activator X, and how we eat our animal foods determines not only our health, but the kind of economy, the kind of farming that we're supporting with our diet.
Demand will increase supply.
Yeah.
It'll motivate people to invest in those areas.
Yeah. Wild salmon. There's just, there's so many benefits to doing that. And now we're finding out that, even in certain well-known centers for shopping, which I won't name, or I guess I can, it's Costco, I think I just learned, is starting to, their vaccinations that are going on in their animal foods that
oh really?
Yeah, even that are supposedly the high quality ones. So
just be careful, like learn about these topics before you're purchasing the animal products.
Yeah. Because there's even if you try to think that organic is some sort of end all be all, it's actually not as
there's holes in organic.
There's holes in it. Yeah. So just do your own research, question everything. Question even, don't listen to me, do your own research, and but start down that road of learning and asking the questions. Why is it that we're, dealing with these health issues? Why was heart disease almost unknown at the turn of the 20th century in the year 1900? It was extremely rare, and cancer as well. And why is it so common? And like you said so well, we can always look at our own self and our own health and ask, what are we doing right now to be healthy or not healthy? But I encourage people to take a bigger picture as often as possible.
Extend that view to their children and their grandchildren.
And look at our grandparents too, and how did they eat? And, what was their health like? And start asking questions like, is it possible we're dealing with a multi-generational problem with deficiencies that get magnified with every generation, like these Pottinger's cats? I know where I come down because I've seen this work in so many people, this approach, and it transforms infertility and health, and then the results in the children. But I encourage people to go down this path and explore. And
I love your recommendation, your idea in action about being more mindful of the animal products you purchase and where they're coming from. And if that feels, one of the challenges people often have is they'll say, well, it's too expensive to buy that healthier food. And I've thought a lot about that and trying to help think about how do I encourage people to do that. And part of there's twofold answer that I've thought about. One is that let's try to identify areas where we're maybe using our resources to purchase things that are not helpful, whether it's your daily soda or your daily espresso or whatever else that's not fueling your body in those ways. And see if you can just transfer some of those dollars to the healthier foods.
Totally.
And the other is also just a mindset of saying, hey, if I invest a little bit here, I'm likely saving elsewhere, whether it's in medications or subsequent healthcare problems or whatever. I think it's an investing in wellness rather than a treating sickness mindset that we have to cultivate as a society if we're going to address these issues. So I love that. Absolutely.
Like if you think grass-fed beef is expensive, then cancer is extremely expensive. And I don't want to just say this lightly, but having a child with autism is incredibly expensive.
Very expensive.
I mean, and they're now looking into the causes of autism. And I'm not saying that taking this approach is going to ensure that you won't have an autistic child. And autistic children are precious and beautiful. And I'm not saying that anything to suggest that.
But we should explore the reasons why we've seen that dramatic increase in the incidence of autism and what's behind it and what can we do about it and how do we love and support the people who are navigating those problems, but then what can we do to understand why it's happening more frequently and reverse that trajectory?
Absolutely. Some of my most the clients I love to talk to at my company Radiant Life were the Amish. For some reason we had a number of amazing Amish customers who would call and order different products, and when I got to know them at these, going out to the East Coast for different events, some of them, I learned more about them and the fact that they don't really have autistic children, for example. And the incidence is probably what it was, if they have any. It's what we were experiencing in the 1970s.
Several generations ago.
Like, 1 in 10,000 children or something like that. So, I throw that out there for people to look into. Like, why would that be? And why would you have a population that lives at the same time that we do that is so experiencing such different results? And so it's an amazing opportunity we have right now if we want to seize it. And so we're definitely looking for parents who want to
be a part
go
of the
down this
movement.
path.
Yeah.
And to transform their future generations. So,
well, I just applaud what you were doing. I think it's marvelous. And I just pray for your success, because it's needed and it's important. And I can't think of anything more important than, again, giving these gifts to our children, our grandchildren. And, I pray for your success. I'm excited to watch it and support it.
Yeah.
And certainly encourage everybody who's listening to find ways that they can maybe be involved and follow along and help make these things successful and be part of that movement.
I love it. Yeah. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. And I wish you success with your project too, the Core 7. It sounds amazing. And
Thank you.
I loved it this morning. So that's the direction I think we're going to be seeing things go, is away from the synthetic and towards the whole food, but we have a long way to go. So thanks.
A long way to go. Little by little. It'll take a lot of us to do it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's stay in touch. Maybe we have another conversation
I look forward
sometime
to
in the
it.
future.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good morning. For the first day in a long time, don't feel like watching from the sidelines. Yeah, I'm waking with the sunrise, get a taste of the daylight this time.